rosemary. On the living room wall in their residence, written in blood, were the words, "Death to pigs," which is on your ID sheet, and it's on the other side too, and "Rise." On the living room wall, written in blood, were the words, "Death to pigs," and "Rise."
Put it on their wall.
That was on the wall, in blood, on the living room wall. Now this is the key to the story here, when we get into this later. On the refrigerator door, in blood, were the words, "Helter Skelter," like you see I have on the ID sheet, which was actually misspelled if you think about how to spell it. But that's how they spelled it, like it's on the ID sheet. H-E-A-L-T-E-R. Helter Skelter was smeared in blood on the refrigerator door. That's a key statement we'll get to later. There's a meaning behind that, okay? This is unbelievable. It would later be discovered that after the murders at the La Bianca residence, the killers actually sat down and ate from their refrigerator before they hitchhiked away. Honest to God. They sat down and ate out of the refrigerator before they hitchhiked away. Can you imagine what the next few days on the Hollywood resident crowd were after you hear news of 2 murders like this back to back? I'll give you some examples how stressful it was. In 2 days after the murders, over 200 handguns were sold out of gun shops in that area. That's why people buy handguns. Yeah, I'll tell you what, you have these school shootings, people go buy guns like crazy after something like that. You sell more guns after that. You're talking about gun control. Have a school shooting, see how many guns you sell in the area. What else might you do other than buy a gun to protect yourself so nobody gets in your house and kills you? You change your locks, right? Very good. You couldn't secure a locksmith for 2 weeks. They were 2 and 3 weeks out to try to get everybody's request to change locks after these murders. It was unbelievable. It just shook up the Beverly Hills Hollywood crowd like you would not believe. Just shook them up. Now, when police put these together, they didn't think they were the same people. They thought they were copycat murders. Okay? And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Just today in the news, some crazy lady threatened the school areas in Denver. There's 500 schools closed down in Denver today because she's a lover of Columbine and went out there and they closed 500 schools down the Denver area today because it's almost the anniversary of Columbine shooting. Well, the reason I mean copycat, my first thing I said to my wife this morning is somebody will do this in Montana or Wyoming tomorrow. Same thing. Yeah, did they? Well, there you go. People copycat stuff all the time. Well, the police thought these were copycat murders, that somebody did this one, and somebody that's sick in the mind thought, hey, that was pretty cool, so they did the other one. That's what they thought. And this investigation was very slow. But finally, 3 months later, they got a weird break in the case. So they didn't have any really idea what had happened for 3 months. And finally, 3 months after the second murder, they get a break. Now this is...
Why wasn't there any more murders after that?
Well, we'll tell you the story. Okay? It's a good story. This is crazy. This is a wild story.
That is.
But it's history.
This is like
Now, there was a woman 3 months later by the name of Susan Atkins that was in jail for prostitution. He was in jail for prostitution. And she began to brag to her cellmate about the Tate LaBianca murders, to the point that the cellmate became so uncomfortable that she informed authorities about the conversation that she had with this woman. So Susan Atkins is in jail for prostitution. She has a cellmate. She starts telling the cellmate about these murders at the Tate LaBianca residence, and the cellmate becomes so uncomfortable, especially, I don't know what she told her, but can you imagine if I was rooming with you and I told you this and you thought that I might have done it? You'd want to get out of there, right? So the cellmate informed authorities about her conversations, and finally on December 1st of 1969, on December 1st, 1969, 6 people were questioned and then eventually arrested by police for the murders. And it all came out of this tip from this cellmate of Susan Atkins. So finally on December 1st of 1969, 6 people were questioned and eventually arrested by police for the murders. Obviously, who was one of them? Well, not yet. Susan Atkins. The others were Charles Manson, Charles Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and Linda Kasabian. You can take your time. So the 6 that were arrested were Susan Atkins, Charles Manson, Charles Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and Linda Kasabian. All of these accused were living in a hippie commune along with 26 adults and 7 children. It was a hippie commune where these people went and lived together. So all of these 6 accused were living at a hippie commune along with 26 other adults and 7 children. So how many total were there?
26 adults?
26 adults and 7 children. How many adults?
39.
26 and 6. 32. So there's 32 adults there, and these adults are all following. Charles Manson's following himself. The other 31 are his followers he's kind of the leader of this commune. And it was located in just a little bit outside of Los Angeles at Spahn Ranch. That's where these 32 adults, followers, and the 7 children were living just a little bit outside of Los Angeles at a location called Spahn Ranch. Anybody know what Spahn Ranch really was? It wasn't a ranch I could think of. It was an abandoned movie set. It was about 25 miles from downtown Los Angeles up in the mountains. It was a movie set, a ranch setting for a movie that was abandoned. And Manson got these followers together and they moved out to the Spahn Ranch, and that's where they put this commune together, about 25 miles from downtown Los Angeles in the mountains outside. It was an old abandoned movie set. Now, your question would be, what in the world would the motive be? Why would these guys, these 6 people, kill Sharon Tate and her 4 guests and Lino and Rosemary LaBianca? What would be your motivation for that? To know that, you've got to know Charles Manson, because he's the leader of this. So let me just try to explain this to you without getting too crazy. Manson had become obsessed with 2 things. The book of Revelation. He became obsessed with the book of Revelation, and he became very obsessed with the rock group, the Beatles. He became very obsessed with the book of Revelation and the Beatles. He viewed the Beatles as prophets that were telling him what to do. It was a little off, no question, right? So he believes very strongly, he's obsessed with the book of Revelation, and he's also really obsessed by the Beatles, and he believes the Beatles are actually prophets that are telling him what to do. Remember the Beatles' White Album I showed you? It was very popular. Well, there's a song on there called Helter Skelter, but it's spelled S-K-E-L-T-E-R. He became obsessed with that song. Obsessed, obsessed, obsessed. Now, the night before they went to the Tate residence on August 8th, Manson got his followers together. He said, quote, "Now is the time for Helter Skelter." Thus, that's why it was written in blood at the LaBianca residence, but spelt wrong. Okay? What is Helter Skelter in Charles Manson's mind? That's your question. That's got to make the difference.
Helter Skelter anyway.
Well, it's just, we'll tell you, kind of. Helter Skelter is just like go crazy. It's kind of the topic of the song. But in Charles Manson's mind, Helter Skelter was a belief that Manson had about a race war between white people and black people in the United States. This is going to sound so bizarre, you're just going to shake your head, but this is what he thought. This is what did it. He wanted to entice a race war between white and black people.
Why?
Well, I'm going to tell you. Now, what he thought in his own mind is he was going to lead his family, these people that lived at the Spawn Ranch, into Death Valley. And there in Death Valley, in his mind, was this bottomless pit with the city underneath the surface. And while this race war was going on between blacks and whites, he was going to take himself and the family and put them in this bottomless pit in Death Valley. I'm telling you, this is what he thought. And they'd be safe from the race war, right? Then they would just wait and wait and wait and see who won. But he believed the blacks would win the race war, okay? And he believed that the blacks were so unable to think for themselves that they would turn to him as their leader, and he would become, in his mind, king of the world. Honest to God. I don't even know if you can write this down, but this is what he's thinking. So let's back up a little bit. He believes in Helter Skelter from the Beatles' Whiteout. He wants to entice a race war between blacks and whites. And he's going to take his followers into Death Valley, and they're going to go into this bottomless pit where this city is in his mind, and wait till this race war gets over, that he's going to come out, and the blacks are going to swarm to him to be their leader because they think he's great, and he's going to be the king of the world. So, what does this have to do with the murder? He believes he has to incite this race war between blacks and whites. It's not going to happen by itself. He's got to do something to get it going. So when he commits these hideous crimes, who is he hoping the police are going to blame it on? Black people. Honest to God. That's what he's thinking. And he believed this Helter Skelter would start this race war. He would be soon leading the country by ruling all the blacks. That's what he did. Now, this is kind of crazy. He gets this philosophy into his followers, and they buy into it for the most part. At least those 5 did, right? He convinces them to carry out these murders. Charles Manson never killed anyone.
Did he get in trouble?
He went to prison for murder, but he never killed anyone. Well, we'll get to that. So, his followers carry out these murders at both the Tate and La Bianca residences. He doesn't kill anyone at either residence. You know how many people don't know that? You know how many people think he was right in the middle of it? He never killed a soul. Well, he wasn't even present at the Tate residence. He wasn't even there. He was present at the La Bianca murders, and what he did is he entered the residence, he tied up Leno and Rosemary before leaving with one of his female followers. That's what really got him in trouble. I'm not sure they could have got him for anything if he wouldn't have done that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But he did. He went in and tied him up, and then left with a female follower and let the rest do the dirty deed. Okay?
So did they find evidence? They just didn't find anyone to connect it to?
Oh, eventually they
Who
found
writes
everything.
about that?
Yeah, they found everything eventually. Yeah.
If that lady was in jail speaking like I used to, probably would say something too.
Oh God. Why? Yeah. I mean, these were brutal.
About
I'd be like,
how,
okay,
what
you
their
do
plan
your
was.
These are brutal murders, right? So we cut to the chase. On June 15th of 1970. Hey kids, we've got to the 70s.
Yay.
June 15th, 1970, the trial of Charles Manson, Leslie Van Houten, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel begins. We're leaving out 2. We'll talk about that later. So on June 15th of 1970, the trial of Charles Manson, Leslie Van Houten, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel. That trial begins. Manson, Van Houten, Atkins, and Krenwinkel.
Realize Victory.
Okay, now, who are we missing?
Watson and
Kasabian. Okay, here's the key. Watson is going to be tried separately. I'll get to that. Kasabian turns state's evidence against the other ones. In other words, she agrees to testify against them for a more lenient sentence.
What a snake.
Well, you would, yeah. Anyway, so now listen. Okay, just in this trial that happened on those four, both Linda Kasabian and Barbara Hoyt are going to testify against those four: Manson, Krenwinkel, Van Houten, Atkins. Linda Kasabian takes a deal. That was a great thing for the prosecution. She takes a deal, right? And she's going to plead or testify against the other ones. Okay, and you'll understand this more when we get more into this. Okay, and what her role was. Okay. Also, a gal by the name of Barbara Hoyt will testify against him. Barbara Hoyt, just so you know, was a Manson follower, and she wasn't present at any of the residences. She actually learned about the murders back at Spawn Ranch when Susan Atkins, who must have been kind of a flat mouth, bragged about killing Sharon Tate herself. Okay, so Barbara Hoyt again is a member of the Manson family, but she wasn't at either murder, and she found out about the murders when Susan Atkins gave her pretty good details on how she killed Sharon Tate. Okay? Well, what do you think Hoyt did after she heard about the murders?
Go to the police.
Well, not yet.
Ask Manson.
She fled, and she didn't even want to testify at this trial because she was afraid of Manson's far reach with his followers, that she might be murdered. So when she was approached about this, because they did their research and found out she lived there, she didn't even want to testify, okay, because she was afraid for her life. But she changed her mind and did testify. So her and Kasabian were the clinchers. I mean, right? Well, on January 25th of 1971, trial began on June 15th, 1970. Ended on January 25th, 1971, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, 6-7 months. The jury deliberated for 9 days. So if you take 9 before that, it would have been, what's 25 minus 9? Would have been the 16th is when the trial ended, and then the jury deliberated. What does that mean? They deliberated for 9 days. Well, they're trying to, you got to get a unanimous. It took them 9 days to get a verdict, right? Well, after those 9 days of deliberation, all four were found guilty of murder.
It took them 9 days to figure out they were guilty?
Well, what happens after you're found guilty? Then you're sentenced. You stay in jail until they sentence you, right? And that happened on May 29th. So on January 25th, 1971, Manson, Krenwinkel, Atkins, and Van Houten were found guilty of murder. And on May 29th of 1971, they were all four sentenced to death for their murders. They were sentenced to death.
So I don't think the people who were following should have been sentenced to death.
They did the murders.
What's the point of killing somebody for
And they
killing
weren't
somebody?
sentenced to death.
Yeah, we're gonna get to it because you're forgetting something.
You're like, hey, killing someone
No,
is wrong, but
you're
we're
good.
gonna kill you.
He's there, yes.
They've already
May
taken
29th,
life, they've rejected
1971
their
is when they were
right
sentenced to
life.
death. Why didn't they die? You're saying that, right? We're gonna tell you. I would,
that they were in did not allow the death penalty.
well, close. Who else was in that? Who else got saved by that ruling later? Sirhan. Remember I told you that Robert Kennedy's assassin was sentenced to death, and he beat what happened is the California Supreme Court overturned the death penalty. All Sirhan and the Manson's family all got life sentences instead. Okay? Now, we forgot about Charles Watson. He was actually convicted of murder in a different trial on October 12th of 1971. And he was also sentenced to the death penalty as well.
Why was he tried separately? Watson. October 12th.
Watson was tried separately mainly because he was kind of the ringleader of the followers that did the murders. See, Manson never killed anybody.
So he was like second.
Yeah, and he was leading the charge. Now, as I mentioned, after the convictions and sentencing, a new death row facility had to be built in California. I didn't mention that, but why? Why'd they have to build a new facility?
Because it was too small for all 6 of
No, they,
them. To keep them all separated.
why'd they have to keep it separate?
Because then they would attack the people.
No, it's, you're right, they had to be separated, the ones that were
Because of
convicted.
the following.
They don't put women in a men's prison. They have their own prison. There was no prison in California for females that were sentenced to death. You're partially right, they're not gonna put people sentenced to death in the same prison as somebody that jaywalks, so to speak. So they had to build a brand new correctional facility in California for the Manson family women who were on death row.
So
When you say
like, where do
Manson
they keep
family,
them?
it's like a hybrid.
Yeah, yeah, is he, yeah.
It's kind of like how they were raised. Like he was pretty much like the father of everyone. and
Well, they all had
was
horrible, yeah, we'll get into that, it's good, we'll get into that.
The story's
Now-
not over?
No, God, no. Now, in 1972, the Supreme Court overruled the death penalty in California. That was the first state in the country to do that. As a result, Sirhan and all of the Manson family members were resentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole.
No,
No.
You know how many have been paroled? We're gonna get to this, though, because we're getting close to
Are they
one.
still alive?
No, we're getting close to one getting out right
No,
now. Yeah, I'm
which
telling
one?
you. I'll get to that.
Oh.
Okay. Now, what I'm gonna do now, that's the story. But what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna tell you a little bit about each of these murders. Yeah.
This would be, or I bet it wouldn't be bad.
So they made
I'm
me
gonna
about
sh-
this?
I'm gonna show you Linda Kasabian in her own words, who heard state evidence. I'm gonna show you a video when we're done. She's gonna tell you all
Can
about
we
it.
just sit and listen to this part? Because I kind of want to listen more.
Okay, well, it's on the video. Okay, you can get it. All right, Tex Watson, let's talk about him first.
But with what Sully just asked, like, are we able to just like listen